I closed 217 enterprise clients on contracts of $10,000 a month or more for my agency before we sold it. And the sales process that we used, honestly, is pretty simple. A lot more simple than most people might think. In fact, they might consider it boring. So what I want to do in this video today is walk through that process from the first time you talk to them all the way up until that contract is signed. And by the way, this is the exact same process that our clients are using right now today in May of 2026 as I record this to close the biggest deals in the history of their agency, as you can see right here. In the early days of my agency, I was taking every single sales call. And back in those days, I was doing the same thing that I see agency owners that we work with do every single day. I was winging the sales call. I would get on the call, ask a couple of surface level questions that I considered to be discovery. I would then get all excited, go into rambling about all the great things that we've done and what I thought we could do for them, our case studies, whatever, only to get to the end of the call, the prospect to say, well, this sounds really good, Alex. Like, I'm very interested. Let me think about it and then I'll get back to you. What would happen then? They would ghost me. I would never hear from them. And then I would spend after every call sitting there going, well, what did I do wrong? Did I not ask the right questions? Did I not ask enough questions? Did I not objection handle them well enough? Do I need a better closing technique? And it took me way too long to realize the issue was not what I was saying or not saying. The issue was I did not have a repeatable sales process that I could put a prospect through and get a predictable result on the other side. So I decided I would become a student of sales and I would start to build my own sales process. I started learning from all the famous sales guys out there, right? The Hermosis, the Jeremy Miners, the Matt Ryder's, the Grant Cardones, the Jordan Belfort. I would go get a book or buy a course or whatever. I would learn a technique from them. I would implement it in one of my calls. I would see how it worked. And then I would iterate and iterate and iterate until we eventually built what I now call the 5P enterprise sales process, which is what I'm going to walk through in this video today. But the reason I would call it simple or I would call it boring is because what I've learned is that you don't need all these fancy closing tricks and assumptive closes and all of these fancy mind games that a lot of sales guys tell you that you need in order to close bigger deals. What I've found is the more sophisticated the buyer, and especially these super high ticket B2B people that you're selling to, they don't go for all that stuff. See, we talk to so many agency owners who think they need some magic formula or some crazy objection handling closing technique in order to close these huge deals. And both from my own experience and the clients who we're working with who are closing these huge deals, that's just simply not the case. You don't need some fancy magic sales mind trick. What you need is to ask questions in such a way that it reveals the true roots of the problem that they have, listen and understand where those are coming from, only pitch them if you actually think that you can help them, and then ask them to make a decision. It's simple, it's boring, and it works. So let's get into the 5P sales process right now. So the whole process is going to boil down to 2 calls. On the first call, you're going to do discovery and pitch. You're going to ask questions to genuinely understand the problem that they have in their business. You are going to pitch them a specific solution. You are going to give them the price, and you are going to ask them to make a decision. At the end of that call, one of 3 things can happen. They can either say yes, they can say no, or they can say what they say 92% of the time based on all the calls that we track. This is interesting. I need to talk to my boss, talk to my partner. I need to get financial approval, whatever, especially at these big deal sizes. Now, what a lot of people might tell you is that if you have to go into a second call, that means that your sales process isn't good enough. You didn't close them hard enough, whatever else. But if you're selling stuff that's $2, $3, $5 grand, I would probably agree with you. But if you're trying to sell $20, $30, $50, $100,000 contracts, you got to understand most of those are not going to be done the first time somebody talks to you. So what you need is a plan in place for the people who are not going to close on the first call, which 92% of them are not. So what you got to have is a second call with a purpose. And I'm going to get more into audit calls here in a second. But the issue that most agency owners have is they get to the end of that first call and that person says, well, I'm interested, but need to talk to my partner, blah, 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 whatever. And they say, okay, well, let's just book a follow-up call for Monday at 10 a.m. and then we'll talk to them then. And I'm sure you've done that, but how many times have you done that? And then the day of or the day before, you get an email from the prospect that says, hey, something came up, we need to reschedule. And then they reschedule and then you just never have the call. Why? Because they knew the only purpose of that call was to try to close them. And if they're not ready to move forward, they're not hopping on that call. So what you need is a second call with a purpose to show them real demonstrable value that you can actually be a good partner for them and that this will work for them. I'm going to get all into the specifics of that here in a second, so don't worry about it right now. But just know, first call, discovery, pitch, ask for the close. Second call, audit, ask for the close again. So the first part of the call is discovery. And I'm sure you've heard a million people tell you, hey, you got to do discovery. You got to ask questions about their business, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm sure you're doing some form of that. But the issue is we review agency owners' calls every single week inside of our program, and we see the same thing. They ask surface level questions about their business this almost as just an excuse to have the permission to then pitch them. But good discovery is the key to making the sale. See, most people think that the pitch is where the sale is made, but that's not the case. That's why people spend so much time trying to perfect their pitch deck, their offer, whatever else. And sure, those things matter, but discovery is where the sale is won or lost. And that's why most pitches fall flat. That's why most of them sound generic, like you were pitching the same thing to everybody else, because you don't know enough about the prospect's specific situation in relation to the problem that they have, not about their business, but about the problem that they have in order to make the pitch sound customized. The best pitches in the world are just listening to what your prospect says and then saying the same thing back to them. So if you do discovery right, your pitch will write itself. You'll already know exactly what to say. But let's get into the 5 P's of how to do discovery effectively. Discovery follows a specific order of 5 P's, and they follow that order because each one builds on the last. Problem, past, pain, potential, and position. The first one is P, problem. Why are you here? Why are you on this call right now? This is the single most important piece of the call. If you do not know the problem, you cannot move forward. And most of you will say, well, what's the problem while you here? And they may say some surface level thing like, oh, we just need more leads. Well, why do you need more leads? What's keeping you from getting more leads? You can't stop at the surface level. And what might also happen is you go, well, what's the problem? Why are you on this call? And they might say something like, well, I just wanted to learn more about your service. Yeah, I'm sure you wanted to learn more, but you don't just spend all day hopping on calls with people just to learn about their services. There's a reason why you wanted to learn about our service, because you probably have some issue you're trying to solve, right? You have to nail down specifically what is the problem that they are trying to overcome. If you do not know the problem, you cannot pitch them. You will not close them at the rate that you should. The second P is past. What have they done to try to fix this before? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And you want to know this specifically because the way that you pitch is going to correlate to the failures that they've had or the successes that they've had in the past. Let's say, for example, they say, well, we hired an agency before, but it felt like we just never heard from them, right? When you get to your pitch, what you can say is hey, we're going to make sure that every week you get this reporting and and really be keeping you involved through this process. And they're going to think, well, wow, this is the exact agency that we wanted. Why? Because you told them what they needed to hear. And then on the other side, maybe they say, hey, well, we hired this agency, but it just felt like every single day they were hitting us up, like they needed us to do so much work for them. And so what you could say is, well, hey, what we want to make sure as an agency is that, you're hiring us to take this off your plate, not to add a whole bunch of work to you, right? And so that's the exact same, that's 2 separate answers to the same question, and depending on how they answer is going to shape how you pitch them. The third P is pain, and this, most agency owners will not ask this because they think it's like salesy or whatever else, but A, that's probably only going on in your head, and B, this only comes across salesy if you're doing it in such a way that it's just checklist. Hey, I just have to ask this thing, right? The P for pain, what is this costing you? What is the consequence of not fixing this thing? You have to quantify the pain that they're having. If you do not quantify the pain, you can't quantify the value that you are going to bring them, which means you can't charge them as much. If they don't know how much it's costing them, they are not willing to pay as much as they should pay because there is no number on it. You have to make this a real quantified number in order to extract max cash on these deals. P number 4 is potential, right? This is the goal. This is where they want to get to. And you got to know the goal, because if you don't know where they want to go, you can't paint a gap between where they are and where they want to go. So you need to know specifically, if this gets fixed, what does this mean? If this gets fixed, how does that affect the company? If this gets fixed, how will you know? How will you measure success? And then later when you pitch, you tie everything back to the goal that they have. And then the final P is position. So these are things like, why are you looking to do this now? Why is this a priority? Who else is involved in a decision like this? This is all the things that surround the logistics of the deal. Now, all of this is going to be the majority of the call. We typically book our calls for about 45 minutes. 20 to 30 minutes should be all discovery. And while you're going through discovery, and again, because we see this on so many sales call reviews, you're going to feel the urge to start to tell them about how, hey, oh man, we work with somebody who had the same problem, or, hey, we saw this too, and this is what we did to solve it. It's not your turn to pitch. Discover while you are discovering and pitch while you are pitching. By the way, you can't make this some robot checklist thing where it's just like, I have to ask this question, check whatever else. That's where prospects, well, if you ever had a prospect say well, hey man, you don't have to sell me on this. You just give me to your pitch. It's all good. I understand. I do sales too, whatever. If you hear a prospect say that, that means that you're being robotic in the way that you are asking questions, and it doesn't feel like a natural, genuine conversation. You have to ask a question and then dig deep in that conversation with a genuine curiosity. So if they tell you, hey, I'm having this issue, okay, what's causing that issue? Well, why do you think that's causing that issue? Well, tell me more about the specifics of how you got there. And so you have to dig into each thing as opposed to just going, well, what's your problem? Okay, well, how did you try to solve that? Okay, is that costing you a lot right now? Well, obviously it's costing me a lot. The ultimate goal of discovery is to know everything surrounding the problem that they have. It's not about understanding their business. It's not about trying to learn more about them as a person. It's about understanding the problem. And I often have people ask me, they'll say, hey, Alex, how many questions? How long should discovery be? And the truth of the matter is it's different for everybody because every prospect's going to be a little bit different. Sometimes you got talking Tommies, right? They got a lot to say. And so it might be 45 minutes of discovery, but then you got some people who are real straightforward. They might just give you one answer or whatever. It might be 10 minutes of discovery, then you're into your pitch, right? Ultimately, what it comes down to is, can you answer all 5 Ps? If you can answer all 5 Ps, you've got enough to go into your pitch. By the way, if you want to spend a week with me working through your sales process so you can adapt it to close the biggest deals in the history of your agency like our clients are doing right now, click the link in the description, join our next enterprise client workshop. But let's keep going because now I got to get into how to actually pitch these deals. Now, once discovery is done, you got to transition into your pitch. And we typically use a pitch deck for this. I'm not going to share the specific pitch deck template that we give to our clients on here because it's just for our clients, obviously, but we like to use a pitch deck because of the visuals. It gives structure to the call, and it's something that you can share with the prospect afterward if there are other internal decision makers, because often there are decision makers that you're never going to talk to. So we want to have some material that we can give to them. This pitch will also follow a 5P process, just like discovery: position, pillars, process, proof, package. Position will establish your credibility. It's typically about 60 to 90 seconds long, just 3 stats. Here's what we've done for other people that's relevant, so you should listen and know that I know what I'm talking about, right? Hey, we've worked with X number of clients, we've managed X amount of ad spend, we've done X amount of revenue for our clients, just enough to get them to go, okay, well, this guy probably knows what he's talking about. Now, pillars, this is your core pitch. You've probably heard people say do a 3-pillar pitch before. We do it in a very specific way so it actually lands. And so this is not typically, hey, we're going to do your ads, and we're going to do your email, and we're going to do your website, whatever. It's not typically about the services. It's typically your USPs. What makes you different? And now this is going to be different in different markets depending on how sophisticated your customer is, aka how many times have they bought from other agencies? Have they worked with other agencies before? The more commoditized your service and the more sophisticated your market, the deeper you've got to go into your USPs versus if you're selling something that's kind of brand new that like not a lot of people have. AI was this. It's kind of moving a little bit away from this as I record this now, at least. And then you can just kind of talk more about the actual offer itself. But ultimately, you want to use each pillar to say, hey, most of our clients say they deal with this. What we do instead is this. And what that means for you is this, right? Problem, solution, outcome. And you want to do that problem, solution, outcome 3 times over, right? So for the longest time when we were selling creative, I would say something like, hey, most of our clients say, and I would typically ask them something in discovery so they would know, like they would set me up for this so well. I'd say, hey, you know how you said that you felt like you were just putting stuff in your ad account, throwing it up against the wall and hoping something sticks? Yeah, but we call that spaghetti marketing. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to dive deep into the ad account that you run. We're going to get all the data, pair that with all the data from all the accounts we've run before so we can make creative that's as specific as possible to what's going to work for you. And what that means for you is your creative has the highest chance to convert. So what I said there, hey, every single client that we work with says they have this problem. What we're going to do instead is this. And what that means for you is this, right? Problem, solution, outcome. Then we're going to move into our proof, right? This is our case studies. What you do not want to do is just run through a whole bunch of random case studies. In your pitch deck, what you want to set up is multiple different types of proof, different types of industries. If you work with multiple industries, different types of revenue sizes, right? Maybe $100,000 a month company, $1 million a month company, whatever, or different types of problems that you've solved. So that way, no matter who you're talking to, you can point to one specific case study and say, hey, we work with a lot of people. We have a lot of different case studies that I can go through, but specifically, I want to point to this one because of XYZ. I feel like they were like you because of XYZ. Here's what we did. That's what we would kind of do a similar version of for you. Does that feel relevant? Yes. Okay, cool. Right. And then you go through the rest of your case studies quickly. Then the 4th P here is your process, right? So this is what it actually looks like to work through. A little trick that I like to use here is to go, hey, based on a scale of 1 to 10, how involved do you want to be in a process like this? 1 being, you never hear from me until the thing's done. I just sent it to you. 10 being you fly out to Dallas and you're in the ads with me, right? And most people will give you a 5. Some will say 3, some will say 7, but it's typically one of those 3 answers. A lot of people are just going to say, well, I want to be involved enough in the beginning to make sure you guys understand it, but I don't want to get in your way. And so because of that, based on how they answer, if they're more, I want to be more involved or I want to be more hands-off, you can really position how you talk about your process so that it seems more aligned with what it is that they want, right? Which we also talked about earlier in discovery in the past section. And then finally, the 5th P, packages. You go through the offer and you say, hey, based on everything we've talked about, this is what I think would make the most sense for you. Do you agree that based on, XYZ things, this is the exact thing that would help you overcome insert XYZ problem they said they had and get XYZ desired outcome that they want, right? They say yes or they say no. Most of the time, if you've done your discovery right, you're talking to the right kind of person, they're going to say yes. When they say yes, you say why. You want to make sure you get them to articulate why this is the right thing, and then they will sell themselves themselves on why this is the right solution. Once they do that, you go, okay, cool, now the price is whatever the price is. And it's very important, we do this for a particular reason, we separate solution and price. If I say, hey, the offer is XYZ amount and it's, $10,000, and they say no to that, I don't know, is the solution wrong or is the price wrong? But if I've gotten them to agree that the solution is right, but then they say no to the price, then I know the issue is not the offer, the issue is the price. The whole pitch itself should be 10 minutes absolute maximum. I'm really shooting for 5 to 7. The less that you can say, the shorter the pitch, the better. Okay, so I want to quickly touch on one of the most important things that I've learned about sales over all these years. Most of the sales training out there is going to tell you about how to handle objections, right? They say, I can't buy for this reason. You've got some magic fancy word track on how to handle that objection. But I don't want to handle objections at the end, because if I handle them at the end, they're just a confrontation. I would rather build into my conversation a way to pre-handle these objections. Typically, there are only 3 real objections at this price point. It's either time, money, or decision maker. Everything else, it's all smoke screens for one of these 3 real objections. So what we want to do is we want to pre-handle each one of those things in discovery or in our pitch. So for time, people will always ask me, hey, Alex, how do I get people to move forward more quickly? How do I shorten my sales cycle? The answer is you cannot make people move more quickly. All you can do is remind them of the urgency of their problem and the cost of that problem. So when we ask things in the position section of our discovery, like, hey, why is this a priority right now? Or when we ask things in the pain section about, well, what's this costing you to not have it solved? By reminding them of those things, hey, you already told me that this is costing you X amount of dollars. You already told me that you've been dealing with this for X amount of months. Why would we continue to put this off? That's the only thing that you can do to get people to move more quickly. And it's how you pre-handle the let's do this next quarter, let's do this next month time objection. And then for money, instead of waiting for someone to say, well, $20,000 sounds expensive, what you've done earlier in discovery in the pain section is you said, okay, well, it's costing you this much. You've quantified the cost of the problem. Remember? You said it's costing you $100,000 a month. I'm offering to fix it for 20, right? The math is just the math. And then finally for decision maker, and this is, again, it's the most common one, especially when you're talking about these really big deals, because there are typically multiple decision makers. If I've asked you in the position section, hey, what's the leadership structure look like inside your company, or how are decisions like this typically made? And you told me, hey, I've got a partner, hey, I've got a boss, the CEO, whatever. I already knew that this was going to come at the end, so I could have set myself up in such a way to know that, like, I don't need to just sit here and this is not a smokescreen. I know it's real type of thing, right? Because there are real objections and there are smokescreen objections. And if I treat a real logistical objection as a smokescreen objection, well, then you're just going to piss off the prospect because you're being disrespectful. If they say, hey, I got to talk to my boss, and you think they're just saying that to get off the phone, so you try to objection handle them through that, then you come across as kind of a jerk. And so what we want to know that early, and we set ourselves up early by going, okay, so you got, a boss. Do they know that you're out looking for this kind of thing? What do they think about this? Then you can position your pitch not only for the person on the phone, but the person that you may never talk to. That's pre-handling. It's handling these objections before they ever come up. So what you want to do, if you're not recording your sales calls, you have to record your sales calls. What you want to do over time is you're going to get questions, concerns, objections, things you've never heard before. Like maybe somebody says, what happens if, there's turnover on our account? There's turnover in your agency. How do you handle that? And maybe you've never heard that, so you didn't know how to answer it, but you hear it in a call, you saw it in a transcript, and now you add it into your pitch. Hey, if your account manager gets fired, here's what happens. And so over time, your sales script, which you should have a script, you should not be winging this like so many people apparently want to. Your sales script becomes a map of every objection, every concern, everything that every prospect will ever say. And so you become bulletproof. Okay, so if you get to the end of the call and they say, hey, I'm super interested, I want to do this, but I got to talk to, whoever I got to talk to, finance, my boss, CEO, partner, whatever, that's when you book in this audit call, right? Your second call has to have a purpose. You don't say, hey, okay, cool, go talk to them and let's follow up on, whatever day we want to follow up on. What you got to say is, hey, no, I totally understand. What a lot of our clients have thought was helpful is what if I did this? What if I went into your ad account? What if I made you a demo? What if I did something and put together something of value for you? So then that way you can bring whoever on a call, we can walk through your specific situation and talk about what it would look like for you specifically. Because ultimately call 1 is all about, hey, this is what our agency does generally. Some people will move forward from just that. But then call 2 is all about, here's what we would do for you specifically. And again, like this is not some fake thing, like you're doing real work. But the reason you save it until a second call is because you want to make sure somebody is both qualified and knows your price and that it's at least reasonable to them before doing all this work for them. Because if you do all this work for them before the first call and they get to the price and it was like, well, you just wasted your time. Again, you can't just get on this call and say, well, what'd you think? All right, you ready to move forward? Whatever. It's got to be real demonstrable value. And that's what's going to separate you from most agencies anyway. So that's going to be the whole sales process. Call 1, discovery, pitch, ask for close. Call 2, audit with real value, and then close. Rehandle your objections so they're not becoming confrontations at the end of the call, and use the same exact process for every single prospect that you talk to. If you want to work with us for a week, walking through your entire sales process, as well as learn about how to reposition your offer, getting the right leads on the phone in the first place, I really encourage you, click the link in the description, check out one of our next enterprise client workshops. I'll see you soon. Peace.